Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Create and Consume, a podcast about what we make, watch, and buy in the era of digital content. I'm your host, Austen Tosone. The Met Gala is fashion's big night out and has been for nearly 80 years now. It is both a fundraiser for the museum's Costume Institute, but also really more so a look into how Vogue views the world because they pull together who they consider to be the creme de la creme of the fashion industry, the art world, photography, sports, culture, tech, and so much more into one epic and exclusive night out on the Upper East Side. I know to many the Met Gala can be a mysterious affair, and while few know what actually goes on behind the curtain at the event because of the very strict no phone policy, I thought that I could still pull the curtain back a little bit and tell you more about the Met Gala in terms of the history of its event to its impact and even what you can expect from this year's event. I have done some Met Gala coverage on my Instagram and TikTok before, but of course, the podcast felt like the right place to do a deep dive. So before we get into today's topic, let's do a little create and consume. As far as what I have been creating this past week, I just published a blog post all about what colors go with red. And I never would have thought to create this blog post. This is actually one of the main reasons that I love SEO. Had I not been doing some SEO keyword research to see what topics might be a good fit for my blog, what other people were currently writing about, and what I could maybe try to rank for or create an article about, assuming that it was a good fit for me. And in doing my keyword research, this most recent kind of big round that I did, I talked about the fact that I had a big content batching day I think 2 episodes ago. So this is one of the keywords that I came across during that batching process. And I was so excited when I came across it. And I decided to write it from a fashion perspective because some of the articles that were ranking I noticed were interior design focused, like what colors go with red in the context of interiors. But I decided to write this article from a fashion standpoint. And I love the search feature on my iPhone camera roll now where I can search like red dress, red sweater because it made it so easy to go back through years and years of photos that I have on my phone and narrow down all of my red outfits. When I finally put them all together into an album so that I could reference as many as possible in this blog post, I had over 60 outfits where I styled red. It really is one of my favorite colors to wear. And so that made writing this blog post actually very easy. So in this blog post, I share some of my favorite color combinations, like red and a specific color that I think look really good together. I also shared what colors I don't typically pair with red because I find that they clash. And I also talked about easy ways to start incorporating a color like red into your wardrobe through accessories. So I will link that blog post in the show notes if you'd like to check it out. I'm actually very proud of how it turned out. And again, in the current fight that bloggers and writers face to kind of outrank or outsmart AI generated content, one thing that really helps differentiate that content is when you provide your own original imagery and anecdotes to show that you, a human being, have done something and it's not just an AI writing about a random topic to rank. I feel like I definitely checked that box because of how many photos I was able to include in this blog post. So we love that for me. And then as far as what I'm consuming this week, as you guys know, Andrew and I are on a mission to watch every season of The Amazing Race. Or if you don't know, now you do. So we are on season 18, which I purchased on Amazon, downloaded, and was so excited to see that it was an all-stars season, meaning that we were able to watch some of our favorite teams from the last batch of seasons compete against one another. I like when there are new people just as much, obviously, but we are just having a lot of fun cheering on some of the fan favorites as we're rewatching this season now. And it's so fun to root for teams who should have won and came really close but didn't, and hope that they get this second chance to really seal the deal. That is what I'm currently consuming. I do kind of want to put a question out there for something that I may consume in the future because I'm debating a couple of rewatches right now. I know You season 5 is about to come out. I probably don't have time to rewatch that whole thing, but there are a lot of details from season 1 I feel like I don't remember that I feel like are going to come back into play now that, spoiler alert, in season 5 we are back in New York because that's where the show started. So I don't know. I did manage to quickly do a search on YouTube and I did see that Netflix has a video that's about 20 minutes that says it's a recap of seasons 1 through 4 of the show. So if that goes well, I'm hoping that there might also be a recap for Stranger Things, but I don't know. Stranger Things to me, like that has a lot of nuance and detail in it and just like more information about how the upside down works and all of the little details. Like I literally have almost forgotten about Barb from season 1, and that is so disrespectful of me, but it's just been that long. Like Stranger Things started when I began my job at Nylon. I'm hoping this You recap actually brings me back up to date and makes me feel like I'm just as on top of everything as I would have been if I had just watched the whole thing straight through. Hopefully there's something along the same lines for Stranger Things. However, for The Summer I Turned Pretty, I think I'm just going to make that a pleasure rewatch because that is only a handful of episodes anyway. And that is based on one of my all-time favorite books from childhood. So that is everything that I am currently consuming and that I am planning to consume. So maybe I'll circle back on some of those plans in a future episode. With that all said, let's talk Met Gala. And as many of you know, I am a former magazine editor, and I definitely feel like I could maybe attend a Met Gala in the future, whether it's to do some red carpet coverage at the event or to actually be a guest maybe one day. I mean, that would be dreaming big because we'll talk about the limited number of guests that are invited later in this episode. I don't know though. I just feel like I'm adjacent enough where I could maybe see myself in the vicinity of the Met Gala in the future. So keep your fingers and toes crossed for me. Just send some good vibes. Maybe I can manifest that. And who knows, maybe on episode 400 of this podcast, I'll be telling you about my experience working the Met Gala red carpet or getting to attend the press preview or something along those lines. So we'll see. But until then, I am a curious bystander watching from my laptop at home, just like many of you. So I thought it would be cool to first start out with like a history of the Met Gala for anyone who is like, what even is this? Why do we do the Met Gala? Where did it all start? To answer the where did it all start part, the very first ever Met Gala was held in December of 1948 at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City, and it was hosted by a woman named Eleanor Lambert. Now, Eleanor Lambert was a very cool lady. I would actually love to read a biography about her or just learn more about her life in general, but to keep it simple for purposes of this episode, she was a New York City-based publicist who really wanted New York to be taken seriously as a fashion capital. I mean, back in the 40s, it was still mainly focused on Paris and Milan. Europe was obviously seen as being the front runner on that side of things. America, obviously, even just being such a newer country, was still like developing style and identity, and everything was kind of still happening in real time. Whereas European cities had so many centuries of influence and so much history behind them, the United States was still only about 200 years old at the time. So there was still a lot of development going on, truly, even in terms of like the manufacturing and setting up the garment district in New York City, to really understanding and developing New York style identity. And Eleanor Lambert knew the potential of New York and said this could be a fashion capital along the lines of a Paris or a Milan, but we need to be doing things that send that signal, that show people that New York can be more than that. The very first thing that she did, actually, the fact that she's the founder of 2 iconic events that happen every year here is pretty crazy. Like, this is the kind of legacy that I am just so fascinated by, and I think she would be very proud of having left. But the first thing she did was create this biannual press week, essentially, to showcase designers and their work in New York. And this is still a tradition that we have today. It has now evolved into New York Fashion Week. So in addition to the Met Gala, she also kind of created Fashion Week, which is crazy. The very first ever Met Gala was actually an intimate dinner hosted at midnight at the Waldorf Astoria, which, I mean, that just sounds so cool and mystical, and I love that people were like, sure, I'll eat dinner at midnight. That sounds great. Definitely very unique and different from how we do it today, but that was the first event, and it was positioned as the party of the year. That was back in 1948. Now, if we fast forward a little bit to the 1970s, this is the time where Deanna Vreeland is the editor-in-chief of Vogue. She took over the Met Gala and started introducing the themes that we now know today. So every year the Met Gala has a theme that is the theme of the exhibition, and that theme also typically inspires the dress code, or there is a dress code for guests that is very tied into the theme, and we'll talk about some examples of those later on. And Deanna Vreeland is also the one who moved the event to the Met itself, so she put everything like right there together in one place. And I think that's significant because it really has shaped how the event works today, in the sense that the exhibition opens and people can actually go in and preview the exhibition while they're there at the Met Gala before anyone else sees it. Fast forward another 20 years, in 1995, Anna Wintour is now at the helm of Vogue. She is the editor-in-chief, and she is the one who decided to move the event to the first Monday in May. So I'm not exactly clear on which months in particular the Met Gala was hosted from the time it started up until we moved to the first Monday in May. But the very, very first one was hosted in December. So moving it to May also gives people, a chance to dress, hopefully, a little bit more for the weather if possible. I feel like the Met Gala is just higher than any season. Like, it does not matter if it's raining or blizzarding or whatever, you're still going to show up and show out in whatever your planned look is, regardless. It's not like, oh, I was going to wear this going out top and now I have to throw a cardigan over it. Like, well, unless you're Kim Kardashian with that weird cardigan from a few years ago that I still don't understand. I absolutely detested that. I thought it ruined the whole look, but I'm not here to talk about that. That pretty much brings us up to the present day. And so you can see how these things all build on one another. So it's still an intimate dinner, but now it's actually hosted at the museum. And now we do it each year on the first Monday of May. And there are different themes for each year and each exhibition. Now, I want to circle back on themes a little bit, but just again, to understand the context of this event, like what is the Met Gala and why we're doing it, I think it's helpful to explain a little bit of the history of the Met Costume Institute and how the fundraising works. The Costume Institute is one section of the Met that doesn't actually receive money from the Met Museum itself, kind of a weird quirk of the whole system. So because of that, we have the Met Gala that acts as the primary fundraising event for the gallery, for the Costume Institute. And the Costume Institute houses a collection of more than 35,000 garments, those spanning 5 continents and just as many countries. So it's arguably the greatest collection of fashion in the world. To put some of the fundraising in context, last year in 2024, the Met Gala brought in more than $26 million for the Costume Institute, and that is crazy. Now, of course, the Met Gala is a large fundraiser for the Costume Institute. That's really like its primary purpose, but I was reading a little bit about this year's gala in the New York Times, and fashion critic Vanessa Friedman, who I have read her work for years, she is definitely one of the foremost authorities on Vogue, on fashion, and definitely on the Met Gala. I liked the way that she summed it up in this article that I was reading, where she basically said that in addition to being a fundraiser, this event is also truly a reflection of Vogue's worldview. I think I alluded to this in the intro a little bit. It really is a collection of people all together who they see as important in fashion, art, social media, film, all of these industries that in many ways are tied together and influence one another and vibe off of one another and honestly depend on one another too. In many ways, it is like getting the Vogue stamp of approval and the Anna stamp of approval. And according to sources for this year's event, we can expect around 400 guests to attend the gala. So how do you even get invited to the Met Gala? Like, how do you find yourself there? Typically, brands will buy out a table, and we'll talk pricing in just a second, and they'll buy out a table and invite any celebrities or models or just anyone who's kind of high profile who aligns with their brand ethos or their values or their aesthetic, and they'll try to fill their table with those types of people. Now, buying a table does not come cheap. According to the latest numbers that I found, tables of 10 are $350,000 each, so that puts an individual ticket at $75,000. And all money from ticket sales goes directly into funding the Costume Institute's yearly budget. And like I mentioned, they don't get funding from the Met Museum as other departments of the museum do, so this really is their primary fundraising event. This year, some of the big sponsors for the event include brands like Louis Vuitton, Instagram, Africa Fashion International, Tyler Perry, and Condé Nast. Since those brands are such major sponsors and donors at the event, we can definitely expect their presence to be felt in many ways, and we'll talk about that a little later on. And I thought it would be helpful to highlight a few of what I kind of see as the most standout themes from over the years. And that's not to say that these are like the most important themes. I think they're all important in their own way and very special, but just to kind of give a look. I tried to pull one from each decade of the earlier years, and then I'll give you a little rapid fire of some from the last 10 years at the end. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, Deanna Vreeland was the one to really introduce themes to the Met Gala and to give basically like a concept for everything to work around. And again, with something like the Costume Institute, when you have 35,000 garments in your collection, that can clearly be overwhelming. So it's important to try to find a common thread, find groupings, find pairings, find themes to play off of. And I think that has served the Costume Institute and the Met Gala very well over the years. So the thematic debut, the first Met Gala to focus on a particular theme, was in 1973, and the theme was the world of Balenciaga. So again, this is the Vreeland years. This is clearly a designer who she admired and probably worked with a lot in Vogue. And it marked the first of many Met Gala exhibitions to be dedicated to specific designers. In 1982, they did an entire Met Gala inspired by La Belle Époque, which, from my understanding, French translates to the beautiful era. And that basically spans like the end of the Franco-Prussian War up to the beginning of World War I in 1914. And the Franco-Prussian War ended in 1871. I remember La Belle Époque because Adriana's character in Midnight in Paris references it when she's talking to Owen Wilson. And actually, as her character alludes to, that is a time that was clearly romanticized because it really was an era of optimism, peace, prosperity, like a time in between wars where everything kind of felt good and safe for a little while. And in terms of the Met Gala itself, this is where, again, in the Vreeland years, it really starts to get extravagant and they lean into the themes. There were horse-drawn carriages down at Fifth Avenue at this Met Gala, and they transformed the Great Hall into a Parisian town square. And I think it's really interesting that like a century later, they kind of chose to reflect on that. Moving on to another kind of important year to note, which is 1995, again, the year that Anna Wintour took over. And this exhibition was her first that she was kind of overseeing. And the theme was haute couture. Again, a lot of French here. And I apologize, by the way, for my pronunciation. I took Spanish in high school and college, so don't come for me. But that translates to high fashion. And in the fashion world, haute couture really embodies extremely detailed work, extremely high-end design, quality, and extravagantness. And that can mean a lot of different things to different people. If you've ever watched a Project Runway episode where they have to do a haute couture challenge, there could be something really simple, but like you can see the hours and hours of handiwork that went into the beading, or it can be something extremely avant-garde and high-end. So anyway, Anna Wintour wanted to do this particular exhibition, and I think this was a good first one actually for her to do because in some ways it sounded like a retrospective of the greatest hits of designers like Chanel and Versace, and really just spotlighting the handiwork and giving people a chance to see up close in person things that maybe they saw in magazines or heard about, but to really be able to go and see the detail of everything in person. I think that's one of the big benefits of having this spring exhibition that the Met does each year, is it gives people a chance to be up close and personal to the clothes. That's one of the things I love most about New York Fashion Week, but this means that anyone who wants to pay admission to the Met can go see that stuff too, which I just think is very cool. Okay, a few more kind of themes of note. In 2001, they did their first ever exhibition spotlighting a political figure, which I don't know if we're going to see anything like this in the next decade or beyond, honestly. In 2001, the theme was Jackie Kennedy and the White House years. And I think this made sense at the time, obviously, because the influence of Jackie superseded politics. Like, she truly was everywhere in American culture when it comes to fashion and lifestyle and all of these different things. She really went above and beyond just first lady duties and became this figure that everyone in America really looked to and admired and took a lot of inspiration from. And so far, this is the only Met Gala exhibition to really focus on and spotlight a political figure. Okay, 2011, I had to put on here because this is the first Met Gala exhibition that I ever got to go see in person. So this also focused on a specific designer. The theme for 2011 was Alexander McQueen Savage Beauty. I remember the first time I ever saw McQueen designs. I just absolutely fell in love with them. I ended up watching a McQueen documentary. I just began reading anything and everything I could about him. I honestly became obsessed just with his point of view. And this exhibition became a really important way to spotlight all of his work as a designer over the years for both his own namesake brand and for other famous fashion houses. McQueen, unfortunately, took his own life the year before this exhibition happened. So, in many ways, this was also a tribute exhibition to him. It brought me to tears. I guess I was a junior in high school at this time, and it just made me so sad to think that anyone else in the world was so sad and could ever feel so alone and vulnerable enough to take such an extreme step. I think that was kind of one of the first times that had occurred to me. And it's obviously such a shame. And he clearly left a big gap in the industry. I think that tribute exhibitions to designers are going to continue to be a theme in the Met Gala moving forward. We've already seen this with Karl Lagerfeld, who had an exhibition dedicated to him in 2023, a few years after he passed too. I also purchased the accompanying book for the exhibition. I own both that one and then I believe the one from 2013, which was Punk Chaos to Couture, because that one was just incredible as well. And the Met also does publish a corresponding, I don't know if there's a proper name for it, obviously, book or like guide or accompanying exhibition companion. I don't really know the right way to describe it, but they'll publish a big, basically like coffee table style book each year with insights written by the curatorial staff, as well as beautiful, high quality photos for things that were in the exhibition. So I also own that book and learned even more like flipping through it and reflecting on it. And just to quickly share a few other themes from the last decade, in 2015, the theme was China through the looking glass. So that was a very important regional kind of focus for the Met Museum. In 2016, they did an exhibition called Manus Ex Machina, Fashion in the Age of Technology. I think we could see another version of that theme come about in the next 5 to 10 years. That's like a little prediction from me. And then 2019, we had Notes on Camp. And I feel like that one was a really fun one to see everyone's different interpretations of the theme. I think that one thing that people love discussing on social media is whether or not someone is on theme, what qualifies as being on theme, people who fully embrace the dress code versus people who fully ignore it. And I feel like because TikTok was on the up and up in this time, I joined TikTok in 2019 at least. And then also because we were on social media more than ever, it felt like the first time that I truly felt tapped into like a true live discussion about the Met Gala. I'm sure it existed on forums and maybe on Twitter in years prior, but this was the first time that I feel like it kind of hit the mainstream and made the Met Gala more prominent for everyone who was just online. And then 2024, last year's exhibition, Sleeping Beauties, is one of my favorites they've ever done. And the theme alone impressed me because, like I said earlier, the Met Costume Institute has so many pieces. And what they ended up doing was spotlighting some of their never before seen pieces from their archives. And I love that. I think that is a reflection of the fashion industry trying to find ways to be more sustainable in general, like to use what you already have, I think is a current trend in the fashion industry, and also hopefully something, we can continue to do so we don't burn through cheap fabrics and run this planet into the ground too quickly, not to get dark, but I do think that was an incredible use of their already existing collection. They obviously also called in some other pieces from other museums, the curatorial team helping Andrew Bolton, who's the head of the Costume Institute, track down what he wanted for that exhibition. And that was just such a cool one in general. I did a little reel recapping the exhibition because I did get invited in to see it last year. So I will leave a link to that in the show notes if you'd like to check it out. Now, all of that brings us up to present day. So let's talk about the 2025 theme for this year's Met Gala and what we can expect from the event. So this year's theme is Superfine Tailoring Black Style. Okay, so the inspiration for this year's theme comes from the guest curator, Monica L. Miller's book that she wrote in 2009. Now, real quick, Monica L. Miller, shout out to her because she is the chair of Africana Studies at Barnard College, where I went. So shout out Professor Miller. This is so cool and exciting to see her involved in the Met like this. I never personally had her as a teacher at Barnard, but the fact that she is not just a professor, but also chair of the department, and that they are looking at her work specifically to influence this whole exhibition, that is so cool. Such an exciting moment for her. So, the inspiration comes from Professor Miller's book that she wrote in 2009 called Slaves to Fashion, which looks at the importance of style in relation to the formation of Black identities. According to the Met's website, this exhibition is going to take us on a journey dating all the way back to 18th century Europe and bring us up to present day. And it's going to dive into and specifically focus on the role of the Black dandy. The Black dandy is a cultural icon who has used fashion as a personal statement and also a powerful tool for self-expression over the years. Now, clearly there's a lot to this topic, so I won't attempt to cover all of the ground here or pretend I'm an expert in this topic. Honestly, I'm going to link Professor Miller's book in the show notes, so that is probably the ultimate resource for what we're going to be talking about. Now, this aesthetic has definitely evolved a lot over the years, starting from the 18th century where it was really introduced, and from my understanding has now become really a way to reclaim power within the Black community, kind of taking something that was thrust upon them in a less than ideal scenario and using it as a means to find their own voice and reclaim power. And I think Professor Miller summed it up well in a video on the Met's YouTube channel. She shared, "This exhibition explores how the history of Black dandyism illustrates the transformation from being enslaved and stylized as luxury items to autonomous, self-fashioning individuals who are global trendsetters." And in addition to clothing, of course, that's always kind of the primary focus, I feel like, but this exhibition will also include accessories, artwork, photography, and film, all equally important to kind of paint a full picture and tell the story of Black dandyism. And other important thing to note, I think, this will be the first menswear-focused Met Gala since 2003, and the first to feature only designers of color. Okay, so that is the theme, superfine tailoring Black style. Now, in addition to the theme, the Met Gala also will typically come with a dress code that is related to the theme and ties into the theme nicely. So this year's dress code is tailored for you. Like I said, I was reading Vanessa Friedman's breakdown of this year's Met Gala in The Times, and she called this dress code suitably vague. I don't know if she knows that that's really funny because we're talking about tailoring. She called it suitably vague. I mean, come on, suits, tailoring? That was funny. I give her credit if that was the intent. If that was not the intent, I'm just reading into it too much. Anyway, I totally get what she means by tailored for you being suitably vague if we're speaking in dead serious terms, which we could be because, again, it's inspired by the exhibition, but I think as a result, we're probably going to see guests go less costumey this year, as they should, to avoid potentially appropriating any part of Black dandyism. Obviously, the idea here is to take inspiration and apply it to your own look and own style. So I hope that as guests are planning their looks, they are consulting with Black stylists and designers and people who get this concept and can help them make sure that they are honoring the theme, truly to avoid appropriation. And again, for that reason, I think the costumey aspect of this might be a little bit pared back, especially for white guests. Also, Louis Vuitton is a sponsor of the event this year, so expect to see lots of that brand on the red carpet and also some suits and tailored outfits. Okay, and then on that note, let's run through the 2025 co-chairs. So Anna Wintour is always basically one of the hosts and co-chairs of the Met Gala event, but she chooses a panel, I would say, of maybe 4 to 5 other people usually to stand with her and to also act as hosts for the event. Let's go through her other co-chairs. First, we have basketball star LeBron James. Maybe you've heard of him. And actually, this is kind of funny. LeBron James is kind of going to be having a Troy Bolton moment when it comes to the Met Gala because he is on the list as one of the co-chairs. He has accepted that role. However, and I'm not a basketball watcher, but I have been told that the NBA playoffs are currently going on. And at the time I'm recording this, I believe the Lakers still at least have one more game tomorrow and may still continue on, depending on how well they do, into the NBA playoffs. So depending on how his team is doing, he may not be able to attend the Met Gala. He may, need to be on the court for that one. So like I said, at the time of recording, I don't know how that's going to shake out. So hopefully we'll be able to see him on the red carpet, or I guess not hopefully if you're a Lakers fan, because that would mean that the Lakers are out. So good luck to everyone, but I would love to see LeBron James on the red carpet for the Met Gala. Another co-chair is musician and designer Pharrell Williams, and Pharrell is such a great choice, I think, for this event. Obviously, I think I first became aware of him and his hats back in the day, but he really has evolved and established himself in the fashion industry. Also worth noting, he is currently employed by LVMH, which is Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, the parent company. He is a menswear designer for them. So since they're one of the main sponsors of the event, this is like doubly not surprising. Like, I think he rightfully deserves to be here, but also it doesn't hurt that, you know, he has the LVMH tie-in too. Yeah. Rapper ASAP Rocky is also one of the co-chairs. And again, you can kind of see how we're spanning different industries here, from sports to fashion to music. Definitely worth noting. And ASAP Rocky has attended the Met Gala also in the past. We also have Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton. I personally don't know that much about F1, so my apologies, but he will be there. He's a co-chair. And then we have actor Coleman Domingo, who is known for his work in projects like Sing Sing and The Color Purple. Also, for the first time since 2019, there will also be a host committee. I don't totally understand the role of this host committee yet. A few names on that are Simone Biles, Audra McDonald, Tyla, but I'm not totally clear on what they will be doing. So it's kind of like a second tier, I guess I would say, of the co-chairs, but we'll have to wait and see. Very excited to see Simone, though, at the Met Gala. That's obviously going to be exciting. And speaking of Simone, who else can we expect to see this year? So there are some regular attendees of the Met Gala, like the J-Los and the Blake Lively's, but I also think that hopefully this year we will get a Rihanna appearance. She apparently had the flu last year and didn't end up coming, but she has made many appearances and is always one of my favorite looks of the night when she does attend the Met Gala. My fingers and toes are crossed because her partner ASAP Rocky, like I just said, is one of the co-chairs, so I think that bodes well for us to see her on the red carpet. And again, some of the usual suspects could also include Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Kim Kardashian. It would be maybe a Taylor Swift. Maybe we'll finally get our Taylor Swift Travis Kelce appearance. I'm not sure. Michaela Cole has attended in the past. Beyonce, we never know with Beyonce, right? But maybe considering the theme, she will prioritize attending this year. Maybe. Fingers crossed. I also personally would love to see Lil Nas X again. I feel like he always is very creative. And aside from some of the usual suspects, I also expect that we'll see more Black designers, photographers, stylists, and athletes, particularly most likely basketball players, if I had to guess based on LeBron's influence. But yeah, I'm equally excited for the red carpet itself as well as the actual exhibition this year. I am excited to see how this story is told, and I don't usually get excited for menswear, but I feel like this is taking menswear and looking at it through such a specific lens and getting to focus really on one community and one voice that I think it's going to be a really cool exhibition and worth checking out. And just to wrap up, I thought it would be fun to also share some further reading just related to the Met Gala. So obviously, Monica L. Miller's book that I mentioned at the beginning of this, I will link in the show notes too. If you're interested in learning more about Vogue and Anna Wintour, I have to shout out Amy Odell's biography, Anna, where she very intricately documents Anna's rise to being the head of Vogue and everything that she has done since being there, her legacy, what she's known for, and also some criticisms of her. I think it's a really well-rounded look at her life. Also, Kristen B. Vateman put together an awesome book called Fashion's Big Night Out, which is essentially a Met Gala lookbook, but it's not just photos, and she really also goes into some of the themes that we talked about earlier. She shares her most iconic, most memorable looks from over the years. And it's a really cool history of this specific event. And if you're looking for a little fiction angle related to the Met Gala, I just finished reading The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis. I mentioned it in the Create and Consume section of last week's episode, I believe. But this is a fictional book about a girl who ends up being Deanna Vreeland's assistant, and she actually ends up assisting at the Met Gala. And I just enjoyed this like imagined perspective of how this event shook out. So I feel like that's a little good mix also of just some extra reading if you feel like it, not homework by any means. I have read all three of those books that I just mentioned, and I would love to pick up Monica L. Miller's book as well. And as this episode is airing, there's just a few days left until the Met Gala, which you can stream, I believe, on Vogue's YouTube channel. I will also link that in the show notes for easy access. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And as a reminder, you can support Create and Consume for free by doing any of the following. You can leave us Apple and Spotify ratings and reviews. Please, please do, if you haven't yet, take a moment right now just to pause and give the podcast a rating. That helps me more than you know and can really help get the podcast into the hands of new listeners. You can like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you're watching this episode on YouTube. You can follow along at Create and Consume Pod on Instagram and TikTok. You could send this episode to a friend who might enjoy it. And as always, don't forget to check out createandconsumepodcast.com for episode recaps and more. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.